In the year of our Lord, 2023, there are more unmarried, uncoupled singles now than ever before. Over 128 million Americans are single, y'all. That's over 31%. And that number is expected to grow. 56% of those who are single are doing so happily. That was once thought to be a conflicting idea. Happy and single? There's something else you should know of these happy singles. If they're over the age of 40, they're probably a woman. That's right. Single women are out on these streets, living their best lives, going against the grain, forging their own paths, and embracing their independence. Okay, but that leaves 44% of all singles looking for love, but ending up in all the wrong places. Not to be hard on the guys, I'm not attacking y'all, but more than half of women surveyed in 2019 who were actively looking for a spouse say men are simply not meeting their expectations. Their values are obscure. They're not financially secure or emotionally mature. Yes, that rhymed. In spite of the disappointment some single women consistently face while lapping the dating pool, they refuse to give up on their happily ever after. As a matter of fact, they live in it now. Well, I've decided to focus our maiden episode, see what I did there, on the subset of women who actually fit in both categories. They, in fact, do want a husband, yet manage to live life happily single. Now, this may not be a myth, but for many, it feels like a paradox. So in this episode, we're going to spotlight a couple of women that have found happiness and peace in spite of unfulfilled desires. Welcome to the Maiden Myth. You're listening to The Maiden Myth, a podcast that challenges myths about single women, explores misconceptions about mature women, and celebrates the women breaking the mold of tradition. In this episode, we're exploring the myth, you can't be happily single and looking for love, right?
Here's a woman with terminal cancer, and she had so much joy. I just felt joy in her prayer. And I just said, in an audible voice, Lord, I want what she has.
Sometimes we don't think that the ambiguous loss is just as real as tangible loss. Just because it's not something that you physically saw die doesn't mean that it didn't die. That hope died when that expectation and that need was unmet. Did you grieve?
I'm your host, Sophia Stevens. We'll be back after this quick break. Before we get started, make sure you're subscribed to The Maiden Myth on iTunes so each week when an episode drops, it will download straight to your device. Are you listening on Spotify? Watching on YouTube? Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you'll never miss an episode.
Listen, first of all, if anyone would have told me that I would be 57 and unmarried, I would have told them that they're a liar and the truth is not in them.
You lie! This is the voice of my big sister, Theresa, who I met nearly 20 years ago while living in New York.
Listen. I know 57 is all relative. It's not old, but is much older than I had envisioned and dreamt of as a little girl being married. So if I'm being honest, realistically, I envisioned myself being married, I would say in my mid-20s and 30s, the very latest. That's the plan that I had in my heart and in my mind. So I'll be married by the time I'm 30 and would have had at least 5 children.
Oh, Lord, at least 5? That was my limit. I wanted to start this episode off with Theresa because she bodies this myth. She's a 10, y'all. Her smile and grace is infectious. She shines wherever she goes. It's not uncommon for folks to stop her on the street and praise her for what they see on her or in her. So much so, it's shocking to learn that she's single and not by choice.
So I have been engaged a couple of times. I don't say that proudly or boastfully, by no stretch of imagination. But what I realized in getting engaged is something about someone putting the ring on your finger that makes things really real. So you're in the relationship, everything is going well, you feel pretty much safe in it and content in it. Then they get down on a knee and put a ring on your finger. And all of a sudden, this is real. Like, they're locking it down. Like, you are the one. We are going to do life together. So it really made me look inward and ask myself, is this the person I've dreamt of? Is this the person I can truly do life with? And because I came back with a resounding no, I realized, one, there's still more work I need to do, because I had a bad habit of pretty much giving myself away. And I sort of almost conformed to what and who and how they wanted me to show up in a relationship. And I kind of lost myself. I lost my identity. I lost myself in wanting to please them and show up for them, not really truly knowing what it means for Theresa to show up for Theresa, but yet hoping someone will show up for me.
You know, the fantasy of finding your person and skipping gleefully into the abyss of love has been marred by the high divorce rate. Married people quickly learn that happily ever after actually requires a lot of work to maintain. A lot. Just like Theresa, this isn't lost on many of us single women either. Yet sometimes it seems like we're still missing out on the better part of life and our happily ever after. In my best Candy Burris voice, the lies, the lies. How do we still fall for this? Is it the grass is greener effect? Or could this FOMO be coming from your mama and them? Hear me out. There are a few places where it is crystal clear to me that I am single. Now, I realize some of you who are listening are, like me, women of a certain age, so you may no longer relate. But how many times have you gone back home for the holidays? Or to a family function and been drilled about your marital status? Are you dating anybody?
Nobody.
Well, do you go out?
Are you trying to meet people? You're focusing too much on your career.
Don't wait too long. Don't you want to have kids? Or you visit your hometown church. Everyone looks so happy to see you until they hear you're still single. No. They're not sad. But the moment right after you reveal you haven't met anyone new, you begin to see concerned faces or furrowed brows. And as they give your hand an encouraging squeeze, reminding you to stay strong, you get hit with the bittersweet, well, we're all praying for you. He's coming. I mean, other than the fact that my singleness now feels like an illness, thank you. But by all means, keep the prayers going, church. Or you're catching up with a friend over a meal and before the appetizers can come out. So, dating anyone new? No. This is often followed by a good man shortage conversation, which I do not encourage with my friends. But I have tried to encourage with my GYN, who feels the need to remind me of my age and the science behind my womb on every visit. I know, she's just doing her job. On the other hand, reminding me of my short window for pregnancy is truly irrelevant when I tell you I'm single. Surely the conversation could stop after that. On the last visit, I sat on that bed table, unclothed, vulnerable to my emotions and the elements. She asked me,
"When was the last time you had sex?"
I just shrugged. It had been years.
"Are you dating anyone?"
No.
"Are you planning on having children?"
Yes. She raised her eyebrows and with much conviction actually said,
"Well, it's time to get started."
Ma'am, with who? Honestly, did she expect me to just pick any random from the road and procreate? Or maybe for you, like me, it was all of the above, coupled with engagements, marriages, children, and remarriages while I'm still waiting for one? Suddenly, during that time, a man became needed for my happy life to be fulfilled. And everywhere I turned seemed to confirm this. These were truly conditions for the perfect storm. After my baby sister got married, I started looking and welcoming any and all suggestions on how to get a husband. My sister suggested I write down 100 things that I desired in a mate. This apparently would help me recognize him better, and this is also what she did. She said, after I got married and revisited the list, I cried because I realized he crossed every number except 3, and they were on the bottom. 97 out of 100? Girl, that's an A. Those odds sounded good, so I got to writing. 1, a follower of Jesus Christ. 2, a financially astute man.
3, he's
8,
kind.
knows how to handle
14,
conflict.
sense of humor.
27, prioritizes his
36,
health.
likes to cook.
By 60, it was becoming increasingly more difficult to think of things that actually mattered, but I stuck to the formula and I forged ahead. I was not about to get a half-baked man because I didn't just push through and finish this list.
68, he owns a
69,
vacation home.
his clothes
75,
are
clean
82.
shoes. 82.
By the time I got to 82, I was left with what I wanted his feet to look like. This was beginning to feel a bit counterproductive. I mean, the list was getting pretty shallow in my attempt to get to 100, so I just stopped at 82. Maybe that's why I'm single. A friend of mine, also a fan of lists, told me that in fact, the number doesn't even matter.
Just write a list of what you desire in a mate and then hide the list.
Hide the list?
Yes, hide it.
This was starting to feel like sorcery. But what do you think I did? Child. Let me tell you, I still don't know what that list is. Somebody in anywhere America is staring at a grocery list of attributes.
Why would you hide the list?
This was now another friend.
No, you need to become the list.
Now that sounded reasonable to me and would definitely keep the list shorter. So I wrote a new list. And I'm not bragging or anything, but I feel like I became the list. I mean, I'm more patient. I'm more kind. My parents and friends even noticed a change in me. Months passed. Then years. Your girl was still single. List and all. I said, look here, I'm done. I'm done with all these lists. And if anything, I got one hidden, so it's still on the table if this thing does work. Then I began to speak affirmations over my love life. I began reading about the art of manifestation and positive thinking. But I remained single. Now, mind you, I was meeting a lot of guys, cool guys who were interested. But what can I say? You may not know if a guy is the one, but you definitely know when he ain't. At least I hope so. The point is, the work was becoming exhausting. Exhaustion that leads to surrender is great, but exhaustion that leads to bitterness, that's unacceptable. And I was starting to sneer at couples who displayed PDA, which had not been my issue in the past. So I took it as a sign that I needed to talk to someone. I decided to talk about it with Theresa. I had a feeling she would know what to say. My first question to her was, what has kept you from becoming bitter?
I think my faith, honestly. Honestly, it truly is my faith. I have to hearken to delayed but not denied. I am not on my own timetable. Our time is different than his timing. And while I would have thought it would have been, in my 30s, I feel like, why not now? And so what prevents me from being bitter is that I'm not looking at it from a place of lack.
And then she shared with me a story.
I had the most fortunate privilege, and I didn't realize at the time it was a privilege until after this experience, but the awesome, amazing privilege to meet a young lady by the name of Sister Brenda Bell. She had 4 young children, all under the age of 10, if I'm not mistaken. Unfortunately, she was diagnosed with a terminal cancer. So a couple of people, along with the pastor of the church, went to go visit her in the hospital. And I was so glad I was one of them. And now I am new to the church, newly saved. But I knew what the assignment was to go in, provide comfort, and before we leave, we were to hold hands and pray for her. So now we're fellowshipping, we're talking, she's in great spirits. And she says, before we could even ask, she says, before you guys leave, I want to pray for you. And we all gathered hands. I can't remember the words that she prayed, but I remember how it made me feel. Here's a woman with terminal cancer, with not many more months weeks or days to live. She prayed for pretty much God's presence and peace in our lives, for our health, for our families. And she had so much joy. I just felt joy in her prayer. She didn't seem sad. She didn't want us to feel sorry for her. And once we started gathering our belongings and we walked out the door, we're walking down the corridor. And I just said in an audible voice, Lord, I want what she has. Now, I don't even know how to pray. I was going to gather hands with everyone and let the pastor lead the prayer or one of the elders lead the prayer. I was just happy to be a part of the prayer. But I knew enough to say, Lord, I want what she has. And what I felt that she had was peace in the midst of a storm. Peace even when things weren't going her way. Peace even though she was about to transition and leave 4 young children under the age of 10 in someone else's care, and that she may never see again. But she had such joy and peace in her heart. She hugged us all. We all went over to her bed and she hugged us and squeezed us. And I've never seen anything like that. I've never seen anything like that. And I don't think I've seen anything like that since in anyone. But in praying that prayer, I mean, I'm still here, praise the Lord. But I'm grateful that I can say in a lot of my darkest moments, God has given me peace. He's given me joy. Even when it confounds my own understanding. It's like, wait a minute. I should be pissed. I should be mad. I should be angry. I should be disappointed. I should feel robbed or cheated. But no, I feel joy. And it harkens me back to something I said in the beginning. If I'm feeling and experiencing moments of unhappiness, then there's something I'm not looking at correctly. I am lying to myself to say, I am missing out because I don't have XYZ. And in light of this podcast, I'm missing out that I don't have a husband.
One day, as I was driving, feeling lonely, disgusted, and busted, and trying to strategize a way to feel better about myself and my life, I recalled an image of a friend of mine I recently saw on social media. That's the thing about those images. Even though I didn't store them on my phone, they managed to get stored in my head. I recalled her looking carefree and standing happily beside her awesome provider businessman of a husband, their 2 children, boy and girl, and the whole family looking drop dead gorgeous. My mind was filled with so much lack. I started coveting at its worst. Suddenly I screamed, "Why, God? Why does it have to be this complicated? Big Mama did not have to deal with this." But also, Big Mama got married at 15 and never divorced because she didn't have her own bank account and couldn't leave as easily as she may have wanted to if she wanted to. Nevertheless, if I had a husband, I wouldn't have to struggle on my own. This is not fair. And then I heard a voice say, "Oh, really?" Now listen, I wasn't 100% sure if this was my voice or the voice of God, but I was immediately engaged. "So you know that your husband will have lots of money?" "Well, of course he will have money." "So you know he won't lose his job after you get married?" "Well, I mean, I can't predict all of that. He would at least be employed." "So you know that he won't suddenly become ill?" "Wait, what?" I started to think about how life be lifing and partners be changing, and I realized maybe the life I wanted wasn't actually being held hostage by the absence of a man. I mean, if I got married with this mentality, would I even be prepared to face the challenges that inevitably come, or would I falter in the face of adversity because this isn't the way life is supposed to be? And with that, I decided as soon as I got home, I would create a different kind of list. I would call it the remedy list. It would be of all the things that I felt I was being denied because I didn't have a husband. First on my list, companionship. Then, intimacy, romance, children, sanitary, sensual sex. I then began to look for 3 areas in each category where this was being offered to me in my life, but I was overlooking them. I was shocked. Here are just a few examples of what I was able to immediately actualize. Companionship. I made an agreement with my mother for us to exchange good morning and good night text messages daily. Now, someone would be aware if I died in my sleep or went missing. Intimacy. I doubled down on my prayer life and connecting with God through nature walks at the park. Romance. I created a romantic atmosphere in my home to stimulate my senses, from flowers, candles, oils, music, colors, plants, and fabrics to cuddle up in. And I committed to taking myself out weekly on solo dates. Children. There were so many young girls in my life who were looking for me to be more consistent in mentoring them. So I got better at that. Sex. Okay, there's no real substitute for sexual intimacy because I'm refraining from it. But I decided to monitor my thoughts and my media habits to keep your girl in check, okay? As well as indulge in more therapeutic baths, exercises, and massages. Sometimes life is offering you exactly what you need in a different package. You gotta be creative. My eyes had been opened. I was woke. So much so, a year after accomplishing my remedy list, I stopped praying for my husband. I felt like my request for a spouse was now superficial. I was clearly blessed. I had a decent job. I owned a couple properties. I lived in multiple cities. I had close family, friends, had my health, my mind. It felt so silly to now beg for a spouse. How was I going to enjoy a life of abundance acknowledging there was any lack in my life? Sounds good, right? Well, I went further. Somehow I figured, if I don't need a man, then I shouldn't want a man. So I let it go. I figured if fully releasing this desire was my way to happiness and peace, then so be it. Besides, every woman who wants to get married ain't gonna get married, and maybe I'm just one of those women. Better to let the idea go than to get rejected or live life feeling cheated. So I denounced the desire, denied my emotions, ignored my longings, refused to pray about it because, my God, woman, look at all you have. Sit down and be grateful. And then the pandemic hit. The Maiden Myth podcast appreciates the support of every listener. We enjoy creating content that empowers women. And although our team is modest in size, we're committed to sharing quality content. This, of course, requires more time, effort, and money. If you love what you're hearing and want to hear more, please consider donating to our podcast. No donation is too small. Links are available on this podcast page. You can also make a contribution at themaidenmyth.com. Thank you. Now, back to our show. That pandemic was bringing out the truth in everything and everybody. As I sat alone, locked up in my apartment, I could no longer deny that a deep, unattended sadness was unearthing itself from the depths of my soul. At that time, I really didn't understand where I went wrong. My plan had been working for years. It was successful, so why wasn't it sustainable? To analyze this, I introduced to the conversation Kandace Cade. She's a therapist at Aspen House Associates in Dallas, Texas. We begin the conversation on the power of unmet needs. I love that you just said it is an unmet need and we're diagnosing it by what we think is missing in our life.
Yes.
So we're not even tapping into what the real need is.
No. We're not even on a conscious level aware. It's subconsciously, I think, that we have these basic needs, these relational needs that are real and valid. And so that's why it's like, even if it feels like, wow, that's so wrong to think that a marriage will, solve your problems.
Right.
I think at the same time, it's irresponsible to not speak to the need because it really is about your unmet needs.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I do, because it's not a matter of being dramatic. There is something inside of me that is looking to be fed. that is natural,
Mhm.
that was created to even be fed,
Yes.
and it's not being fed. I'm going to just play devil's advocate here.
Okay.
Could it ever just be marriage? Could it ever just be a person?
That would,
Could it ever just be the baby? Could that ever be an unmet need, or is that generally not it? Could it be something tangible, basically?
I think the answer is yes, and I think
Okay.
that it's valid to want those things. And the problem is not wanting those things. And at the same time, you also have to be aware of the fact that we have these needs regardless of if you get married, if you don't, you still have needs that need to be met. And that is accessible and available to you, whether you ever have a romantic partner or not. And that is the crux of the issue. If we
That
understood
is,
that,
yeah.
we wouldn't make it about marriage or a baby or a job or anything.
Here's what I struggle with. The idea that me wanting a relationship or me wanting love in a very strong way that it affects me is somehow not really tied to that thing. It's tied to something else.
Well,
When that thing that I want, go ahead.
it's both. It's not one or the other.
You keep saying yes and. Do you see how I'm struggling with the yes and? Do you see?
Which, let me just normalize that for you. That is the whole point. If you look actually on Aspen House's website, that is on our website because that is a core thing that we believe in, because it really is in that tension. That is where the answer is.
What do you believe the solution is to living in that space, that tension, that space of unmet need or desire?
I think it starts with being able to acknowledge that you have these unmet needs and being curious about them. It takes a certain level of self-awareness and reflection and insight to be able to say, man, this might be a little bit bigger than just this one relationship, or, how are my needs being met in my relationships across the board? It's kind of, it's about being able to see that it's not the problem. The relationship, wanting the relationship is not the problem. And your needs are not the problem. But being able to say, as I wait on that, I can still get my needs met at the same time, and practicing that. Practicing sitting in the tension is the answer.
That's the best way to get through this.
That's the only way.
Not even like, you said only. Oh my goodness.
I'm sorry.
That's the only, it's fine. That's the only way, is to practice sitting in that space. How do you do that?
Before we even get into the how,
yes,
this is hard. I'm saying it like it's
you
real
know what?
easy.
I'm noticing. I need you to be my thoughts. Let me take this whole moment and just play this when I'm being so incredibly hard on myself. You said, let's just acknowledge this, because you see where I went. Let's fix it. Let's fix it.
Yep.
Get to mining. You said, no. This is hard.
Yep. And before you even talk about the how, I need to give myself grace with learning how to do this, because it is hard. I'm really saying it like it's this easy thing, but it's really not. It's hard. And there are days where it's like, I'm done with this. I am tired. I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm angry. I'm hurt. I'm grieving. That's all a part of the process. And I think that that's how you do it. I really truly think that's the only way to do this well, is to sit in that tension. And the how part is practicing. It's not even a thing that I can even speak to, other than, of course, checking in with yourself, being aware of your feelings. What am I feeling? How is that making my body feel and respond? Where is that showing up in my relationships and in my everyday interactions? Am I having physical symptoms? Is my sleep being interrupted? Am I having panic attacks? Whatever. Just being aware of what's going on with you, sitting with that, processing your emotions, journaling, therapy, all the things that we kind of know to do. But the practice part, the actually just letting it come, letting it be messy, sitting with your experience, your feelings, and not dismissing it or pushing it under the rug either. And the art of sitting in the tension is just sitting and just noticing.
Oh.
It's not doing. And that's what makes it hard, is because it's like, I'm not doing anything. It feels like, or if I am doing something, it's the stuff that I don't want to do. I don't want to sit with my feelings. That's not enough. That's not moving me towards a man. What is the point?
It sure isn't.
Right? And also, if you
Right.
neglect that part, you run the risk of still being unhappy when you get the mate, because it's about the unmet attachment needs. It's about the childhood wounds. It's not about this desire for a mate. The desire is good. The needs are good. All of this is okay. And then also, my question is, let's start being curious about where this shame is coming from. Why is it not okay for me to want a mate? Is that just internally coming from me, or where else is that coming from? Is it coming from social media? Is it coming from the culture? Is it coming from the church?
Nah, it wasn't the church. We all know those girls desperate for a man. The fear that I could become that girl if my desire got the best of me sometimes made it difficult for me to acknowledge out loud I even wanted a man. That was one of the truths I acknowledged in my breakthrough. And this is how the breakthrough happened. One day, after escaping my quarantined quarters for a break in the park, I called another big sister of mine, Jennifer. She'll be on a future episode. I shared with her my struggle, how I had found this extraordinary way to get my relational needs met and recognize all the blessings in my life, but how I'd also started to feel ashamed for lamenting to God about other things I was unhappy about, how I felt guilty asking for anything else that I wanted. She sweetly said, "Yeah, friend, you got that wrong. Tell God everything. Ask for what you desire." It was so obvious when she said it. I mean, it's scriptural. From that conversation, I also realized why my plan had been failing. My denying or ignoring of my desires, because at this point, it was beyond romantic relationships, y'all. I wasn't acknowledging anything that I wanted beyond what I had. That not only prevented me from being honest with myself, but also prevented me from presenting them to God. Hear me. There was nothing wrong with my remedy plan. It really did open my eyes to all that I was grateful for. The problem is where it was birthed from and for. I created that plan from agitation, fear, and lack in order to silence my desires, rather than created it from stillness, gratitude, and love that gave me permission to hope for even more. So basically, I stopped allowing myself to hope for what I wanted, and for justifiable reasons.
Sometimes it's easier to lean into defeat or to rehearse tragedy than it is to actually lean into the vulnerability of hope. And I just have to pause right there, because that quote came from my bestie, Rebecca Fajay. She's also a clinician at Aspen House. So that came from her brain. But that's the reality of it. So the reason why hope is hard, just to get to the meat of the matter, is because it requires vulnerability. So in order to hope, I have to first say, I want this thing. And even if I don't get it, this is how I feel. I really do want this thing. There's an attachment there. There's a need or a feeling there. That's important to note, because if you're not vulnerable, you're not actually, it's not actually hope. I don't think so. I think it's something else. It may be desire, but to have a hope, it's like almost, I want to say almost that like desire is like, it's something that you want, something inside, but a hope is like almost outside of yourself or a yearning.
Yeah.
Hope is actually almost a positioning.
Position.
It's like I'm saying, I want this, and I'm also like open for it. And I think
Yeah,
that's,
I like position.
yeah, that's what that is. It's the positioning of yourself. That's why I think it's so hurtful and so painful when our hopes are not spoken to or are, fulfilled. The Bible says hope deferred makes the heart sick. That's real.
Yeah. Do you think hope ever can become toxic?
No. I think what does become toxic is when our hope does not allow us to hold on to both hope and reality at the same time. Because then it's not hope anymore. This might be a strong word, but if hope is not attached to reality, then is it delusion? Is it like what's keeping you grounded? Are you just in the clouds hoping and it's not, there's nothing wrong with hope. You know what I'm saying? But if you don't have, okay, this is my life, this is what's actually happening, even from a cultural standpoint, the statistics you were talking about, even understanding
Right.
that, being aware of that. If you don't have that
Right.
in your view at the same time as you are,
Right.
holding your hope, that's
Right.
dangerous. Because it requires vulnerability, right? But then without reality,
does.
you're too vulnerable. That's part of why it hurts so bad when we have these unmet expectations, because they weren't even realistic to begin with, because they weren't tethered to reality at all. And so sometimes we hurt ourselves. And that's the most painful thing about all of this, is because we're thinking it's about the marriage or the relationship, and it's so much more. It's like, baby, you need to hold you. You need to see about you. Why are you worried about wanting to love someone else? And it's not it's not even about the self-love thing, because that's overplayed too. It's just recognizing that you're a human with real needs.
Right.
Period.
Right. Period.
And that they have to be attended to, whether it's in a romantic relationship, whether it's within your spirituality and your relationship with God, whether it's your relationship with yourself.
Everything you just said, I agree with. And then there's something in the back of my mind that's like, so am I only limited to what my reality is?
No.
Is that as far as I can hope? So then where does the reality, like how do I measure what is real and what is not?
You're not going to like the answer.
Oh, I think I'm going to enjoy it. If I hate it, I'm going to love it. so bring it.
I think it's that same, how do I set an intention? It's
the and
you practice.
Oh,
you have to
you were
hold.
right.
It's the holding both. And that is so hard for all of us. We want to do one or the other. To put it in word form, a picture form, I'm a big dreamer. My head is always in the clouds. And sometimes, girl, I have to pull myself in and say, okay, Kandace, wait, let's be realistic. Okay. So
right.
even for me, but the picture is, for me, how I think of it is I'm like this. I'm looking up in the sky. I'm in the clouds. This is where I'm at. But if I never look in front of me for 1 second, just to be aware of what's going on this level, I'm gonna miss important information. Yeah. And so it's about being able to do both, hope and stay centered in, oh, this is my reality, and just being aware of both. Because the hope, if you continue to hope and you're positioned, that's what your focus is on, versus you're married to this outcome. You're so focused on getting this outcome that you're not really even doing the balance of holding your hope and looking at reality. You're in the future. You're not being present. Like, you see what I'm saying? Like, there's so many different issues that can come from this.
As it turns out, I was not only struggling to live in the tension of hope and reality, but also struggling to live in the tension of hope and grief.
Hope, grief, and honesty are at an intersection. And you can be on two streets at the same time.
Oh, that tension.
Mm-hmm.
Hope, grief, and honesty are at an intersection.
Yes. And you cannot divorce grief from this entire conversation, because reality
Oh,
reality is that we will have unmet expectations. On this side of heaven, we will have life happenings, things. We'll just have life. That's what you can boil it down to. And so as we hope, as we lean into that vulnerability of hope, which is painful sometimes because sometimes it hurts to hope, there's grief that we have to process that grief of those unmet expectations. Sometimes we don't think that the ambiguous loss is just as real as tangible loss. Just because it's not something that you physically saw die doesn't mean that it didn't die. That hope died when that expectation and that need was unmet. Did you grieve? Did you process? Did you allow yourself to feel all the feelings that come with that and then say, okay, now I'm going to hope again? After that? Or did you just say, what happened? I don't know. There's a lot of things that could have happened after that. So
this was so good. But because I'm a gangster, I had to ask. You shouldn't sulk, though, right?
you should yourself.
Oh, I knew you were going to say that. I knew you were going to say that. But how was that profit? How does that just get over it? Move on. Move on.
My first question to that is, why is it not okay to feel and pause in that way? And then also, our entire culture says, do not feel your feelings. You're supposed to be happy. You're supposed to smile. You're supposed to work. You better take that 1-2 days bereavement and get back on that clock.
Oh.
We do not grieve as a culture. We do not pause. Capitalism does not allow for pause. Shut up, get over it, stuff your feelings down. It's bad if you have feelings. You're weak if you have feelings. Move on. There's other fish to fry. Life goes on.
Oh my God. And so you're saying don't police that.
No.
Don't
let your body, just like how when we cut ourselves and there's, the blood, pores or whatever, white blood cells rush to the site to kind of close it up. Our emotional, workings, inner workings, muscles, for a lack of a better word, have the same ability. So when you allow the natural healing process, whatever comes out, whatever feeling is in there, when you allow it to be fully processed in whatever natural state that is, you can move on. But if you don't, it's like you're too busy fighting yourself and the emotions and trying to hold it and stuff it that you can't even fully move on. It's still in there. Your body is holding that.
She's right. So after that talk with Jennifer in the park, I went home and I cried, y'all. Oh, I said, thank you, Lord, for all these blessings. Now where my man? And then I sat at the intersection of grief and honesty, then hope and honesty, then hope and grief. And then I went back to grief and honesty. I still sit with it whenever it needs to be sat with. Even as my needs continue to be met in other ways, I've given myself permission to hope and grieve at the same time. And that has released more joy and more room for love and creativity and blessings. I understand happiness is not me feeling good all the time. That's delusion. Happiness is not life under perfect conditions. That's fake. But for me, happiness is learning how to find contentment and peace with wherever life brings me. I'm no longer looking for a man. I am ready to welcome one. But see, maybe that's where the myth is in that statement. Happily single women aren't looking for love. They are just open and positioned to receive more from wherever it flows because they're already in it. Theresa confirmed this for me.
Do you believe you have your happily ever after right now?
So in light of the happily ever after that you referenced, no. But in light of being in a posture of happiness, yes. So whether he comes or not, I'm going to have joy. I'm going to have peace. I'm going to be happy. Because for whatever reason, and I know this sounds, like a cliche and almost like a cop-out, but I truly believe God has a perfect will and plan for Theresa's life. I truly believe that. And if that is not a part of it for whatever reason, then God has me focusing my energy on someplace other. And I'm okay with that. Even if I don't receive in this life everything I felt I wanted, I understand that God's perfect will prevail and that he would get the glory out of my life. And in doing so, I can feel abundant joy knowing that he's ordering my steps.
I love
if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
Thank you to my lovely guests, Theresa and Kandace. Y'all are my first guests. And to this incredible audience who's listening for the first time to the Maiden Myth, thank you all so much. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, share, review, follow. We want to hear from you. Here at the Maiden Myth, we replace fallacy with fact, trickery with truth, and assumption with assertion. It seems only right to counter the myth that began our episode with a powerful affirmation. Today's affirmation is, I am allowed to ask for what I want and for what I need as I celebrate what I have. The Maiden Myth podcast is produced by Philosophia Productions, mixed by Sanka Nguyen. The music supervisor is Johnny Steele. The managing producer, Life Creative Group. Assistant producers, Sarah Benebo and Ronald and Doretta Stevens. Special thanks to Michelle Adewumni and Jennifer Edison. Want more? Join the Maiden Myth community at themaidenmyth.com. You can also find us on every podcast platform, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok, where you can leave a comment and join in the conversation.